Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, Yadi and I are here to talk a little bit about the census, why it's so important to complete it, and the effects that it has on our community. As we were preparing for all of this, for me, I think one of the most important things that came out of it is being in 2020 and it being an election year. A lot of the immigrant and undocumented community can't necessarily vote, and oftentimes we're greatly affected by politics and everything that's happening and everything that's changing. For me, I think the census really became one of the things that I can actively do to make sure that I'm influencing politics, that I'm being counted, and that the needs and the resources that I need and that my community needs are definitely there. Yadi, go ahead and share with us a little bit of kind of what it was for you as we prepared for this workshop.
Yeah, Angeles, thank you. And thank you for that insight that you provided. And I learned a lot from just getting ready for this webinar today or for this presentation. And so I think one of the biggest things for me is I didn't realize how much money an individual or a person or a family can bring into their community, especially into low income communities, right? And so one example for me, or one thing that comes to my mind, is just comparing some of the schools, in our low income regions compared to other areas, right? So why do some kids have more resources, more field trips? Why do some kids have more iPads in their schools than others? Why do some teachers have more resources? And having kids myself, I see that doing the census can really bring in that financial resource to a lot of the schools. And also with healthcare, I didn't realize how much it affected healthcare, and we will be covering that in a little bit, but it really, how many people submit the census in their state and in their counties really helps out their communities and can really set their city or their county up for the next 10 years. It's not just for today or tomorrow, but it's also for the next 10 years. So it affects us in the long run, right? So I'm hoping that other individuals also learn today a little bit more about what the census means and how it can really help out their communities and how they can bring funding into their communities simply by submitting the census. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off, and just a little bit of knowledge of what's been going on this year with the census. So this year, the president was pushing to exclude undocumented individuals from the census. But based on the New York Times, this September 2020, Angeles, a federal court actually rejected Trump's order to exclude undocumented individuals from the census. The three-judge panel unanimously said that the president could not remove non-citizens from census counts, which are used to allot House seats. He actually does not have the authority to actually exclude undocumented individuals. I was not aware that, number one, he was trying to do that this last September, and that was one of the actual fights that the judges were trying to, that they were actually fighting that and pushing back this last September, and they actually won. So the effects that this would have had, so not allowing undocumented individuals, so the undocumented population, from completing the census, it could actually exclude millions of people from the population count. And this population count is actually used to divide the number of House seats that each state gets. So I know a lot of us, especially right now with everything that's going on, we're all kind of learning how the elections work and why these seats are so important for each state to have. So by not completing the census, it would reduce the population, which would then reduce the number of House seats given to the states with actually large immigrant populations. California and Texas being one of them. So since California and Texas has a huge population of immigrants, immigrants can really have their voice heard by just completing those census. So those seats would have been redistributed to states with few undocumented immigrants, right? So in particular, Alabama. Right now, Alabama is projected to lose a House seat next year. However, many undocumented individuals and mixed status families still have fears in completing the census. I hear this all the time, right, from parents at our children's schools, during parent meetings, or even with students. I hear a lot of students saying that, the family is fearful right now of submitting their census because they don't want their information being shared with the third party or with immigration services and so on. Also, mixed status families have fears in completing the census. And according to theconversation.com, the United States might not be able to get information from around 10 million people in the 2020 census. And I was reading something from the Pew Research Center, and I found that 10 million is actually the number of undocumented immigrants living in the United States. Even more, Angeles, another 16.7 million individuals live in a household with an undocumented member, which may also now be counted in this year's census due to fear. So with their mixed status family, sometimes it's the mom or the dad or both that are living with their U.S. citizen children, right? So sometimes because the parents are undocumented, or one of the children is undocumented, or somebody who is staying in that household, like a grandmother, a grandfather, an uncle, and aunt, is undocumented, but the rest of the family isn't, that mixed status family might still be very fearful of submitting that census form. So because of that, we might also not get the count that we need from our immigrant and undocumented families in our communities for the census. So, Angeles, go ahead and tell us a little bit more on why the census is so important.
Muchas gracias, Yari, for that background information and getting us started with all of this. We know it's a lot of information to cover. I will be talking about 4 different reasons why the census is so important. Yari mentioned a little bit about the house seats and how population counts determine how many seats are, or how the seats are split up across the 50 states. And this is dependent on the population of each state. After the census, after the 2020 census, southern and western states, as you mentioned, Yadi, such as California, are expected to gain seats. So it is really important that that count is accurate, or as accurate as it can be. Another reason is funding. The Census Bureau in the fiscal year of 2015 federal funding during the fiscal year of 2015 used data from the Census Bureau to distribute $675 billion in federal funds to state and local communities. And this was to fund health, education, housing, and infrastructure programs. So ensuring that the census is accurate also ensures that that funding is equitably distributed amongst our communities. And this will affect programs such as education grants to states, National School Lunch Program, and also Head Start. Adding a little bit more to the services, we also have government and nonprofit organizations really relying on this data to determine the need for new services, roads, hospitals, schools, and other public sector investments. So it is really important that as our population and our communities are growing, that these services are available to us. And the census is one of the ways in which this data is obtained. And lastly, how it affects our undocumented community. Like we said, much of the money will also be distributed to our communities. Shortly, we'll be talking a little bit of kind of what questions the census is asking. And one of the biggest takeaways that we want you all to take from this is that immigration status is not asked on the census. And therefore, our community receives that money for fixing the roads, as we said, free school lunches for your children, and other public services. Yadi, I know earlier you were mentioning a little bit of kind of the effect that it has on the healthcare system and those services available. Would you like to touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, and I would also like to add a little bit as far as the school lunches. And I know, like you mentioned, the funding that's coming in is federal monies, but the federal money that comes in is to help everybody in the community. Sometimes we get kind of nervous or you know, kind of concerned because a lot of times undocumented individuals don't qualify for federally funded programs. However, when this funding is provided to the communities, it's for everybody. So for like free lunches, there's no immigration requirement, right, when your kids are getting free lunches at school. So please be aware that even though this is federally funded, or the money that's coming is federal, it doesn't necessarily affect any of the programs if undocumented individuals are taking advantage of it. And so also, yes, let's talk about how the results from the census helps determine funding for some of the largest healthcare programs and services, including, but it's not limited to. So these are a couple of the programs that the census helps fund, and this is why it is so important. So in your community, if there's a need for mental health services or prevention and treatment of substance abuse and preventive health and health services, this is where the county programs are receiving their funding from the census. So based on the population in your communities, the funding will be then dispersed to these different programs to help out the individuals that need it, right? Also, if you are familiar with CHIP, which is the Children's Health Insurance Program, so this program is, especially in San Bernardino County area, this program is for children under the age of 18 who need medical services. So even things like for physical, for vaccinations, or the child gets sick, CHDP is a program, or CHIP is a program that helps children receive that health care that they need. So again, this is a program that is funded through the census data. And the health center programs, which also determines which groups in which areas are underserved. So based on this census, your community, your county, your state is going to see which are the groups that are underserved, which are the groups that need more assistance and resources, and it's also going to set the income guideline requirements for programs such as free lunch. So we all know when we're applying sometimes for that free lunch or for programs in schools or in programs for, you know, health access, there's always an income guideline requirement. Those income guidelines come from the census answers as well. So this is something that I really learned from getting ready for this presentation, is how much would the state lose. So we're here in California. Angeles and I are in the state of California, and it varies per state. But based on Census California, it's on census.ca.gov. Okay, I didn't know this. State census officials have estimated that falling short could cost California as much as $1,000 per person a year. So what that means is that if a family of 4 in some parts of California, because now how much the community gets per person for the census answers depends also on the region of California, but the minimum is $1,000 per person. So if you have 4 people or individuals living in your household, and you do your census and you report all 4 individuals, or you say there's 4 individuals living in your household, you have now contributed $4,000 to your community. So it's equivalent to $1,000 per person in your household. So I kind of just wanted to put it into perspective on how much your community would be losing if you don't submit that census, especially if you have, you know, a number of people in your household. What we would also be losing is a seat in Congress. This is why the state is investing so much for outreach to the households that have typically been hard to count. One of them is immigrants in general, and then the other group is also undocumented and low-income families. So those groups have always been very difficult to target and to count in the census to try to get those numbers and provide that financial assistance or provide that finances into the community. So I just want to emphasize, this is why it is so important for undocumented families to complete the census. Now, let's talk about who should be counted, right? So based on 2020 census.gov, you should be counted where you were living and sleeping most of the time as of April 1st, 2020. If you are responding for your home, count everyone who was living and sleeping their most at your household at the time as of April 1, 2020. This includes young children, foster children, roommates, and any family member or friends who are living with you, even temporarily. Angeles, can you please let us know where do you complete the census?
Yeah, of course. Yadi, would you actually be able to pull it up and maybe we can show everybody what the website looks like? So we'll be going to 2020census.gov, and that's where you'll be going to complete the census. In total, it shouldn't take you any more than 10 minutes. And once again, so Yadi has pulled it up. And so you'll see it says that you can complete your questionnaire via phone, online, or by mail. We'll be talking a little bit of kind of what those options look like and the resources that are available for each option. We do want to highlight that there are a handful of languages, and I just forgot the number of languages in which the census is translated. So you are able, in the up top right-hand corner, you are able to change the language so that the questions, here you go. So you are able to change the language so that the questions are clear and easier to respond. Once again, we do want to say there are no immigration questions or questions about your immigration status on the survey. And the information that you do provide for the census is not shared with ICE or any other state or federal agencies. And so talking about when should I apply? So most recently, actually, as of last week, there was a court ruling that extended the deadline to August 31st. Today being August 1st, we do have one more month to complete it. Yeah, the decision was made after data collection had to be halted due to the pandemic. I'm sure most of us, and hopefully not most of us, have received folk knocking at our door asking us to complete the census. Due to the pandemic, some of that outreach did have to be halted or put at a pause. So alternatives to completing the census, we can visit the website. There is also, if you visit the website, there is a phone number that you can call and complete it via the phone. In English, that number would be 844-330-2020. If you're looking to complete the survey in Spanish, that is 844-468-2020. As well, we do have a third option. If you received the pamphlet via the mail, you can still send that back up until October 31st. So really, you have 3 different ways to be able to complete this, and all 3 should not take more than 10 minutes. Like we mentioned earlier, with the census folk knocking at our door, for the immigrant community, it just really is important that we identify folk. Make sure they are wearing their badges. They will have the census logo, and that is always visible along with their name. So if you have somebody knocking at your door and you think it might be the census, make sure that you're able to identify them first. And then once again, know that even when they are at your door, they cannot ask about your immigration status. Yadi, is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I know for many that, like you had mentioned, I just want to reiterate, the deadline for the census, they had put it for much earlier, for the end of September. But due to, again, a court ruling, a court hearing, it's not, it was not appropriate based on everything that's going on with COVID right now. So it has been extended due to that hearing. So yeah, again, you guys have until October 31st to fill it out. But like I always tell everybody, don't delay. Do it as soon as possible so that you don't miss that deadline. And I just want to let everybody know that you matter, your family matters, your community matters. And this is a great way to, especially right now in the times that we are in, to make your voice heard, right? This is one way for you to really help your community. Yeah. All right, Angeles, anything else you would like to add before we close today?
No, Yadi, just I guess just thanking everybody for listening in. As we always say, knowledge is power, and making sure that these surveys are safe for our communities is really important. But most importantly, it is crucial that we do complete the census and that we are counted, and that these resources do come to our community. So yeah, thank you once again for joining us and listening to us. But that is all from me.
All right. Thank you, Angeles, and thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.